friends, and welcome back to my channel. And today I wanted to do something that kind of matched in with the theme of non-fiction November, and I wanted to recommend to you some of my favourite non-fiction books. I have to admit that I am mostly a fiction reader, however occasionally I do kind of delve into the realms of non-fiction, so I thought I would recommend to you some that I really enjoyed and some that I think are some non-fiction books that I think are really worth your time. So without further ado, let's get into them. The first non-fiction book is kind of a memoir, autobiography, and it is Scrappy Little Nobody by Anna Kendrick. When I read this, I listened to the audiobook, which was narrated by Anna herself, and I thought this was super hilarious. I thought it was just so funny, and it was all about how she started out as an actress, how her life kind of developed, her experiences in the acting industry, in her personal life, and how all of that kind of came together. It also has some reflections on her performances in the Oscars and how she kind of felt while filming Pitch Perfect, which was one of the pinnacle films of her career. This was really cool, especially because I listened to the audiobook. I thought that Anna was as funny as she is in her films. The sarcasm was good. It was a really light-hearted read. It did have some serious moments in there, like she spoke about the death of her grandmother and how she felt during that difficult time. But it was a super interesting time. It was a super interesting read that gave me insight into an actress who I sort of admire, who I sort of respect. And yeah, it was really good. So the next book is a little bit more serious, a little bit more heavy. However, I still think that it is such an important book, and it is Everyday Sexism by Laura Bates. Now, this book started out as kind of like a Twitter account, a blog, which was where women recorded their accounts of sexism in day-to-day life and how it is a common occurrence in women's lives. I read this upon the recommendation of Jean from Jean's Bookish Thoughts, and this book is a powerful book. It is essentially like the Twitter account, like the blog, accounts of assault, sexism, abuse that women receive in their day-to-day lives. It has a foreword by Laura Bates. It's very kind of displayed in a very dignified way, and it is presented so women's voices are basically given the voice that they deserve and the space they deserve. This book is organised into categories. I think there's like different types of assault, different experiences, and it's literally quotes from women who have encountered sexism on a day-to-day basis. And this book really brings to the forefront the problem that sexism, gender inequality, that it's still happening. This book isn't that old. I think it's about 5 or 6 years old, and many of the issues that are spoken about in it are still so prevalent today. I think that it is a really important book for any woman and for anybody who is interested in any sort of gender studies. It is such an essential book. It's put together beautifully. Laura Bates has just done such an amazing job. It's a heavy read, however I think it's a really worthwhile read, and I think you should read it. Next book is in a kind of similar category to Laura Bates' book, but it's a little bit lighter, and it is How to Build a Woman by Caitlin Moran. Now, this book made me laugh out loud. It is absolutely bloody hilarious. It is Caitlin Moran's account of growing up and being a woman, and Caitlin Moran was from Wolverhampton, well, she still is from Wolverhampton. She kind of reflects on growing up in Wolverhampton, and a lot of her work kind of reflects on growing up as kind of like working class. She grew up on benefits and what it was like to be a teenager in the Midlands when you're goddamn poor. I am not goddamn poor, however I completely understand, coming from the Midlands, what it is like to grow up in the Midlands. Anyway, she kind of talks about getting your first period, having sex for the first time, and growing up, and the trials and tribulations that young women face growing up. It is absolutely hilarious. Just, she reflects on personal accounts, she reflects on accounts of friends. She also talks about how she kind of developed her career and how she made the most of herself, and how she ended up being a music journalist in London, even though she didn't come from a journalistic background. She didn't go to uni, she just kind of wiggled her way in, which is absolutely hilarious. She kind of goes all the way from puberty up until childbirth, which I thought was so funny and so good. This is a really light-hearted read. I absolutely flew through this one. I loved it. I've seen Caitlin Moran talk a couple of times live. She's one of my favourite authors. I've read some of her fiction as well. I absolutely 100% recommend this. It again touches on some key gender issues, but it's a little bit more light-hearted than Everyday Sexism. But you should definitely read it. So the next book is completely different to the last two, and it is This Is Going to Hurt by Adam Kay. This has been everywhere recently. It's a really popular book. And this is about Adam Kay's reflection as his couple of years as a junior doctor. He starts off the book by saying that he is no longer a junior doctor, he is no longer with the NHS, and he basically provides a diary of some of the crazy experiences that he has while he was a junior doctor. He also talks about how difficult being a junior doctor was and some of the strains that the NHS is experiencing and how he experienced those firsthand. This book has some amazing anecdotes from his times with patients, how he kind of had some really good moments. There's some really terrible moments in there. It really shows the ups and downs of the NHS, and I think to me, as somebody who lives in the UK and benefits from the NHS, it helps me understand why the NHS is such a key service that needs to be protected and saved, please. Anyway, this book is quite heartwarming. It's also absolutely hilarious. Adam Kay, even though this has medical terminology in it, he introduces it in such a light-hearted style that you don't really feel like it's a heavy read. You fly through it, you're engaged, you're with him every step of the way. He's written another book about Christmas, and I'm going to read that soon. Maybe it'll be on a future list. However, this book, even if you know you're not into medicine, I think is absolutely key if you live in the UK, and it really gives an insight into what life on the inside of the NHS is like if you work for the NHS. It's amazing. I loved it. I recommend it. So the next one is Weird Things Customers Say in Shops by Jen Campbell. Jen Campbell has two books, which is Weird Things Customers Say in Bookshops and More Things Customers Say in Bookshops. This is essentially what it says on the tin. Jen Campbell, before she was a writer and a booktuber, link down below, she's amazing. I love her. Before she was a writer and a booktuber, Jen Campbell worked in several bookshops in London and Edinburgh, and she just accounts some of the weird things that customers say. If anybody has ever worked in retail, you will completely understand the weird and crazy things that people say to you. It's just they're really short, witty, funny books that Jen has compiled, and I think they're really unique and different. As a book lover, I really love books about books, and that it was just such a super funny short read. It definitely kind of comes over the stigma of non-fiction is boring, non-fiction is long, non-fiction is not complicated, because this book is exactly not that. I find it hilarious, and you should probably read it. And the final book is also a really short, simple but quite heavy book, and it is We Should All Be Feminists by Chidamanda Ngozi Adichie. She also writes fiction. However, this was kind of intended to be like a letter to her future daughters or future women of why everybody should be feminists. This is again another short and concise book, and it literally lists and provides a really short explanation as to why all women should be feminists and why we should all be supporting feminism's causes. It's simple as that. However, this book is short, but it packs a punch. I read it a couple of years ago. However, I still remember it. The messages in that book I still use in day-to-day life. I definitely think it's worth your time, it's worth investing in. She does it in such a short, succinct way. However, the message really packs a punch. There's not much to say about this. However, it's a really essential book. You'll probably gather that I read a lot of gender-based books, especially my non-fiction, but this is a really key book. I'd put it on like the key essential reading lists for women's and gender studies kind of stuff, especially contemporary issues. Chidamanda is kind of really iconic. I really love her. This book is great. So I hope that gives you some insight, especially with Non-Fiction November, as to some non-fiction books that you can read that are really worth your time and are really interesting. Especially if you're not a typical non-fiction reader, these books are really different, really unique, and they might even break you into the genre. I don't read loads of non-fiction, however, if I pick wisely, I find that some non-fiction books are actually my favourite books. There are lists of books that I probably haven't included on this one, but I might even do a part 2 of this video if you like it. I hope that gives you some ideas for Non-Fiction November. Comment down below if you read non-fiction. Do you have a favourite non-fiction book? Let me know in the comments down below. And until next time, I will see you again soon. Goodbye.